Our scripture lesson today is from Matthew chapter 2, verses 13 through 23, and this is the New Revised Standard Version. Now, after the Magi had left, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt and remain there until I tell you, for Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him." Then Joseph got up, took the child and his mother by night, and went to Egypt, and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet, "Out of Egypt I have called my son." When Herod saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, he was infuriated, and he sent and killed all the children in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years or under, according to the time that he had learned from the wise men. Then was fulfilled what had been spoken through the prophet Jeremiah. A voice was heard in Ramah, wailing and loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be consoled because they are no more. When Herod died, an angel of the Lord suddenly appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother and go to the land of Israel, for those who are seeking the child's life are dead." Then Joseph got up, took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was ruling over Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. And after being warned in a dream, he went away to the district of Galilee. There he made his home in a town called Nazareth, so that what had been spoken through the prophets might be fulfilled. He will be called a Nazarene. This is the word of God.
So, dear friends, yes, after Christmas, this is the lectionary reading which comes if we follow these lectionary readings from Matthew. And it comes right after Christmas. And, you know, in the gospel, it is written right there, after Jesus is born and after Magi depart, as we heard. It's a reminder that there are serious matters in the world. That it is not only a Christmas joy, but there are also situations and circumstances which are deadly. At the same time, I must say that we don't know whether it happened or not. The escape to Egypt and the killing of the holy innocents. There are doubts about historicity of this story. We know that Herod the Great was a tyrant, that there was even saying that it is better to be a swine in his stable than being his son, because he actually executed several of his sons. But historicity is still questionable, because those who wrote about him, like Josephus, Flavius, would probably record any kind of atrocity of this kind, even though something like maybe 12 children might be killed, we will still hear about it. But this story is a perfect example, and I did a little bit about it in Friday message, of Haggadic Midrash, Jewish rabbinical genre, Jewish rabbinical style. Midrash means biblical, theological, or ethical exposition of the text or ethical issue. And Haggadah is a legendary supernatural story, mostly about rabbis, but it can be anything. So Haggadic Midrash is a way of making an important theological or ethical point by the means of legendary story. So we don't know whether this story or what we heard happened, but we can decipher its theological meaning regardless. And so let us start first to understand what it means. Joseph has dreams, just like Joseph in Hebrew Bible, in Genesis. He is famous for his dreams and ability to interpret those dreams. Then Joseph in Genesis, like the Joseph in Matthew, are both bringing their people to Egypt, to safety. In the case of Genesis, it is because of the famine. Here in Matthew, it is because of this tyrannical ruler. Talking of rulers, there are also evil kings in this story. There is an evil king commanding the killing of baby boys, being it Herod in Matthew or Egyptian Pharaoh. Later on, right after Genesis ends, there is a story of Exodus. And to make it absolutely clear, Matthew uses the fulfillment formula. Fulfillment formula is actually repeating 3 times in our reading. And this happened to fulfill what God spoke through the prophet, in this case, Hosea. Out of Egypt I have called my son. And of course, this is not just one son. In case of Hosea, he is speaking about the nation of Israel coming from Egypt, being called from there. The message of this Haggadic Midrash is therefore quite clear. Jesus represents or is like a second, better, or ultimate Moses. Soon in his baptism, Jesus will cross the Jordan River and will lead God's people to the promised land, and under the divine rule, divine heavenly kingdom. So we don't know whether it happened, but because of this Haggadic Midrash, we now know so much more. And there is still even more to come. Because it is not only theology presenting Jesus as an ultimate Moses. We are also pulled in, you and I, through that tragic story. This story, this legend, this Haggadah contains another fulfillment formula. This fulfilled the words spoken by Jeremiah the prophet. A voice is heard in Ramah, screaming and much weeping. Rachel screaming for her children, and she cannot be comforted because they are no more. Of course, this is in that context of the killing of the innocents, but that fulfillment formula is looking not to Exodus, but to Babylonian exile, quoting from Jeremiah. And this goes beyond the history. This Haggadic Midrash leads us to recognize deep spiritual, or if you wish, demonic, diabolical, satanical dimension. And pulling us in. Do you recognize, or actually our kids are able to recognize it, as we heard. One comes to the mind that Mariupol theater, I preached about it almost a year ago. You know, in Mariupol, that was that first larger city which was fought over in a big way. And in the center, there is a famous theater surrounded with a park. And in front and behind this theater, on a pavement, was a big letters in Azbuka, in the Russian script, written, Дети. That means children. In a size of tennis court, in big, white, clear, capital letters in Azbuka, in Cyrillic. And you know what happened to that theater? It got bombed. Or that maternity hospital just in the same town, which got bombed on purpose. Or we know about similar bombings happening in Syria, and probably done by the same pilots from the same nation. Or you can hear about torture chambers, especially for children and youth in Kherson, recently liberated. Or endless brutalities, so that we are not only looking towards the Russia or Ukraine, endless brutality. So in the Central American cutthroats trained in Fort Benning, besides places, in the School of the Americans, as it used to be called. They have now a new name, they rebranded, but it's still kind of seared in the minds of so many. Because those cutthroats from Central and Southern Americas were trained there how to terrorize their native peoples and poor campesinos. Now we see the refugees coming across our borders. And of course, running away for their life. Would you blame them? Refugees, asylum seekers, migrants. Yes, we need to surround them with our love, as we heard in the children's message. We need to be empathic, feeling how they feel. But how they feel is not only that they are uprooted and they are alone in our own country. They still carry baggage and wounds from their original homes. We know it from our own experience with our refugee families and in our legal clinics, as you heard. But families with children on our Mexican borders are, of course, quite common sight. When we were there, thankfully I did not hear any newborn babies there. Only elementary age children on Mexican side preparing to cross the desert. Can you imagine 8-year-old in a desert running for their lives? There are, of course, stories of little children crossing with their parents those hostile wildernesses of Sonora Desert. So we don't know whether the story in Matthew ever happened, crossing Sinai Peninsula and its desert. But we know it is still happening. And to add insult to injury, fully armed American vigilante groups are patrolling our southern border. And they are very friendly with our border patrol and are detaining the migrants on their own, giving them Spanish New Testaments, flyers with evangelical prosperity gospels, and T-shirts with QAnon slogans, and handing them then over for deportations. That is why we want to bring with us, when we go down for our mission trip to southern Arizona, we want to bring with us T-shirts with proper biblical message and genuine prayer our prayer and our blessing for those who run for their lives across deserts. And you have it on a bulletin cover in Spanish, because we want to translate it so that it can be understood by those who are wearing it. Even though many of those who are running across the borders, Spanish is their second or third language, believe it or not, because their primary languages are the Native American languages of Central America. And so I know that our giving network is also looking into a way possibly to support this, getting these t-shirts printed so that we can bring them to them and equip them and with something else than let's go Brandon kind of messages they are being given. This is where I wanted to close this sermon. But then I realized there was yet another closing fulfillment formula. They settled in Nazareth so that the words of prophets could be fulfilled. He will be called Nazarios, or Nazarene. And here, no matter what you do, no one really knows which exactly prophets are being quoted. All those other passages we can find, but here no one really knows. It might be some mangled understanding, maybe of Matthew, maybe of his people he heard it from. Because Nazir would be the one who is being dedicated. That means someone who is put aside, like Samson was, for instance. So that might be playing, but it really does not make sense in Hebrew language or in Semitic languages. Nazareth is definitely not derived from that. It sounds similar, so maybe that is that. And so no matter what we do, we don't know, and it can be just quoted out of context and just like folksy etymology. I took it as an invitation, therefore, a license, if you wish, for creating my own modern Southwest environmental Haggadic Midrash here. And you know, dear friends, that Southwest is famous for extraterrestrial crackpottery, I would call it. Badlands of Nevada and New Mexico and Arizona, all these full with locals and visiting screwballs, seeing extraterrestrials almost behind every rock there. And they indeed have rock aplenty there, believe me. Why should the extraterrestrials travel who knows how many light years to visit out of many places those empty, desolate badlands? You know, people are just wondering. But then, one day, hiking in the 100-degree sun in Arch Canyon in Arizona, southern Arizona, south of Ajo, I had that strange feeling, like a presence, and heard a voice speaking to me in all languages at the same time, but I understood. So you think we come all the way out to the earth to meet with you people, huh? How do you call yourself? Homo sapiens sapiens? Twice sapiens? Oh, such brutish civilization like yours are dime a dozen in every galaxy. We are here to visit and learn from much higher form of life. You call them lichens. they grow here on rocks. Like Taxosporium sancti Jacobi, for instance. You just named it recently. You never paid attention until a few decades ago. And they mastered new levels of symbiosis. The art of 2 or more different species of fungi, algae, and bacteria fusing together and living in complete harmony. And they feed off rocks, and in mutual harmony survive most dangerous circumstances, almost anything. Now you know what you trample on. And that was it. Well, it might have been just a heat stroke, hallucination, but that is my modern Sonoran desert Haggadic midrash. You will never know whether it happened. But from that moment on, I started to pay attention to those underrated grayish, greenish, brownish, whitish, or occasionally orangey little scales and flakes we hardly ever pay any attention to. But more importantly, I recognize that how we live together and support and nurture one another, that might be more important than any kind of gadgets we have and privileges we claim for ourselves on account of other people or living creatures or even plants.